All right, so we do have a quorum. This is an official meeting of the Fire Mitigation Advisory Committee as a workshop for the sole purpose today of coordinating the mitigation of town-owned rights-of-way in Green Mountain Falls with CUSP under the furworm grant, and which has 2 years remaining. And we have already identified that there's approximately 13 acres of workable land on the rights of way. I think that CUSP is willing, ready, and able to remediate the rights of way. I think it is the desire of everyone in Green Mountain Falls town management, as well as the mayor and the board and the Fire Mitigation Advisory Committee, to pursue this as a very needed and valuable project. So what we're trying to do today, Adrian, addressing you specifically, is we as a town want to know, and by the way, before I launch here, we do have a quorum. It is Kelly Hunter, David Douglas, and John Bell of the Fire Mitigation Advisory Committee, and missing is Paul Yingling and Dan Batten, who is on leave of absence at the time. We will not address the agenda in this meeting. I'm not going to have 3 minutes per speaker. I think anyone who's on the phone can raise their hand or ask permission to speak during this workshop. So Adrian, we've talked about this somewhat, and we have already begun drafting, or having our town attorney draft a release agreement that would give the formal release and to CUSP and the private landowners who might be adjoining the rights of way to avoid any disputes. One of the questions we have is, if CUSP has done this sort of work before, where you were working on a public-private property boundary, and do y'all have a release which is already accepted by you for this purpose?
So we do have a release. It's just the license to enter agreement that we've sent to the town for some, work on town property in the past. But if it is private property owners, we would have to get those from them as well if we were planning on being on their property, which it sounds like the goal is that we don't want to be on their property. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of out of breath. I'm walking around on on a project right now.
I think what we're trying
but I mean, we do have those license to enters, but I don't know if they'd be useful in this situation.
Okay, I think what we're trying to avoid is the potential that you could inadvertently cross a property line and cuts a tree, and to do as much to mitigate that in advance by first of all, having an education of property owners to let them know what we're going to be doing, and to ask them to, participate with us by signing a release which would prevent any disputes with CUSP in case you errantly cut a tree that was on private property, or the property line might even be disputed, without having to go through the process of a formal survey and try to determine exact property lines. It's a measure of releasing CUSP from liability for cutting a tree that you shouldn't have on private property. So that's the thought process here, and that was one thing that I'd understood from you that you would need in order to go follow through with this project?
Yeah, so I think I've talked with you about this in the past, but when we go out and we GPS stuff, I mean, our accuracy is only within 15 feet or so, and it's not professional grade survey stuff. So we can't get it totally accurate. So if we are able to get something from property owners saying, yeah, that's fine, if we go out and we flag it and they say that line is acceptable to us, we do think that that's the property boundary, yada yada yada, we're good. Then that would be helpful. And then if there is any disputes, we would either have to just go back, so make the unit smaller, encroach onto the town property a little bit more, or we may have to get a surveyor involved, depending on how the town would want to handle that.
Okay, so ideally you would have a release signed by the property owner.
Yep.
That would be ideal. In the event
Yep.
that we can't get that, you would go by your GPS, but add in a little bit of a buffer just to avoid the possibility of encroaching errantly. Am I stating that correctly? I mean, you would be willing to work without having a property owner's release, but it would just mean stepping back a little bit from the property line where you've identified it by GPS.
Correct. Yeah. Generally what I do is I say, 10 to 15 feet buffer.
Well, keep in mind that these rights of way, maybe Kelly Becky or Nate might be able to help me here, but some of these rights of way may only be 30 feet or 40, 45 feet. What do you know, Nate, right offhand, what some of them would be?
Nate stepped out for just a second. But yeah, I certainly the rights of way within town vary, the distance, the amount of space that is available for those. I think that we would just have to look at plot maps and kind of identify, what those what each plotted width of the street is versus constructed width. And then I think another thing that ended up, and correct me if I'm wrong, Adrian, it sounded like you were saying that you would flag an area prior to working in it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so with something like this where there could be discrepancy, I would like to flag it a little bit in advance so that we can give those property owners time to go and look and see where we're flagging to see if they do have any issue with the property line or if they're okay with it. And then we can address any issues from that. But I would like to give it some time before we actually get going, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Adrian. That addresses my major concern.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Becky, as a clarification. So
this is John Bell.
Go ahead,
I
John.
comment on that?
Yeah.
So speaking of a specific right of way, that's the continuation of Illinois from its current termination point to the connection with Mountain Avenue. I'm on one boundary. The Nords west of me are also on a boundary. We're full-time residents. The resident on the other direction is a summer resident. So Adrian, how do you address those situations when residents may not be around when it's flagged, between when it's flagged and when it's intended to be cut?
That's a good question. That may take some brainstorming. Are you able to contact that resident? Are you guys on friendly basis, or do you have their phone number or email?
Yes, I have contact information. I'd be happy to contact them. But again,
I think that probably.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I think probably the best way to handle a situation like that is if we are able to reach out to them. Neighbor to neighbor is probably best, as opposed to Adrian Knight, Forester for Coalition for the Upper South Platte that they've never met. It goes a lot further to have neighbors communicate with them. So I think that'd be the best first step. And then other than that, maybe getting a letter from the town saying that we're getting ready to do work on right of way. And then if we still haven't been able to get a hold of them, we may just have to push that area or shrink that area, is what I would think.
Very good. Thank you.
It sounds like a good first step, and an early first step would be to begin marking all of the rights of way, Adrian. So that we
Yeah.
at least have that done, and we can then begin the education process and the private property owner notification process, and try to get
Yeah.
people on board.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. You know what I can do? I mean, I'm pretty slammed the rest of this week, I think. But potentially next week, you know, I can start working on getting all those right-of-ways into my GPS program, and I can potentially go out and start flagging, you know, sometime next week, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
If that's, you know, agreeable with the committee.
I think the main thing, we need to make sure that it's agreeable to the town manager, because ultimately it's the town manager's responsibility, and or you know, this is the management of the town, and its property is the town manager's job. And so I don't want to speak, since we have the town manager, Becky, on the line. I think Becky needs to buy off on that as well.
Okay.
So Becky, how do you feel about that?
I think that probably since we've got a little bit of a change of trajectory, I would like to run this by my board. We are meeting on December the 13th, just to make sure that there's you know, that they're aware of the change of plans. This is you all's recommendation to proceed in a little bit different way than was expected in the onset. And then from there, certainly, you know, I think the next piece of it ends up making sure that we get adequate communication out to the residents, so that when they see the flagging going up, or the, you know, the delineation markers, that they're not caught off guard. Everybody knows what it's for.
So you're, let me paraphrase what I heard you say. You would like for the Fire Mitigation Advisory Committee to make a formal recommendation at the December 13th meeting of the Board of Trustees, recommending an initial step of CUS marking the property boundaries of all the rights of way as the first step of getting this project going.
Yes,
And then-
that's what I would prefer.
Okay, and then subsequent, we need to lay out what the scope would be from that point of just marking the boundaries. Would you say we need to also recommend a notification to property owners and the you know, an acceptable and approved letter of release by the property owners being prepared?
Yes.
Just shouldn't we notify people before we start flagging and going out? So I think that should be the first step. Step one would be sort of notification. Step two would be actual on the ground flagging, I would think. Yeah, board approval first, flagging, or notification second, flagging third. The other thing might be, do we know that all these right-of-ways areas are valuable to work on? I mean, there might be some that are mostly scrubland, for instance, on the north side, on the south, you know, the south slope of Dewey. I don't know if those are, you know, worth the work? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. And or prioritization of these in terms of the value of work would be another thing I would think.
I think that's a great question, Nate. And I would think that Adrian, when he is out doing that field work, if he looks at a right of way we have on our map and he determines that there's not work to be done there, he could make that call and just say, we're not flagging that particular right of way because we don't believe there's any work that needs to be done. I mean, would that be a solution?
Yeah, I think so.
Are you comfortable
Yeah,
with
that's,
that?
I mean,
Adrian, are you comfortable with that?
yeah, I mean, that's something that I can do while I'm out there.
Okay,
'Cause, yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell just looking at a map, but once you kind of get boots on the ground in the area, it's you get a lot clearer picture.
sure. Okay. Nate, we're referring to this release document that we're having the attorney draw up. Have you got an update on that?
I spoke with her this morning and we can modify essentially the agreement we used for the co-swap project for, gaining access to a property. We'd have to just change the wording that we had on that because it's a slightly different type of project. But the last thing is I told her I would touch base after this meeting just to make sure nothing substantial has changed, and then sounds like she can have a document finalized pretty quickly within the week, I'm guessing.
Okay, good. Because if we're going to recommend it to the board, I suppose on the 13th, we'd want to get that release maybe included in the recommendation that this would be the document we're proposing for use with the private property owners.
Sure. And we talked about it being worded in a way that, because we have to understand that when we go in there with GPS, it's only going to be, accurate to within 5 to maybe 5 feet. I would say 10 feet. And so it's going to have wording that kind of explains to people that this is the method of property boundary that we are using, and kind of explain our process, that we're going to go in based on that GPS, go in, mark the boundaries as we see them. And then, there'll have to be some wording to describe how the decision is made to cut trees. I mean, I'm assuming most of them will be dead or dying, but if there's, a cluster where one should be removed to, one live or, a live tree may be recommended to be removed because of the clustering, then, we may have to have discussions at that point if it's near discussions with the landowner, if there's a live tree that's targeted, that's near the property boundary. So it's just a matter of, I think, wording and just clarifying what our process is going to be, what our estimated sort of accuracy is on the GPS that we're using, and how we're going to approach questionable trees that are on the boundary, I guess, because of that plus or minus 10 feet.
Right. Adrian, is it your plan when you're marking is to mark all the trees you plan to cut, or is it you're marking where you think the boundaries are?
Yeah, so that's something that I was going to speak up about too when you guys send out these notifications. I mark boundaries. I don't mark take trees. So when you guys send out the notifications that we're going to be flagging, I think it's a good idea to make sure that you say that very explicitly, that these trees are boundary. If a tree is flagged, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be taken.
Okay,
I wonder if
Because a
there's
lot of times,
way-
you know, I'll flag the big nice trees and people get all scared that that tree's going to get cut down. So
sure.
Well, and I wonder what the process for, you know, any trees, whether if they are within town right away, if a resident has a dispute of not wanting to have that tree taken down for other reasons, maybe it's their primary privacy tree or whatnot. What's the recommendation there?
are you asking me?
Just putting it out to the group.
You know, what my opinion on that is if it's on your guys' property, I think that you would have final say. But of course, we don't want to ruffle any feathers. And if it's a tree that someone cares really deeply about, we can figure out ways around it with our prescription. I mean, I keep the prescription pretty flexible for situations like that. So if that does come up, I think we'd be able to work around it.
Is your prescription, Adrian, something that's similar to the one we used it for co-swap, do you know? Or maybe, I was just thinking we should probably include that prescription in our communication just to say this is what's gonna happen. Just so that
Yeah, it's doable.
people can think about that beforehand.
Yeah, you know, not really having seen a lot of the right of way yet, it would be kind of a loose prescription, but I can write something up and send it to you so that you can have that information.
Okay. I think that would be helpful, just a general sort of, however general you can be, I guess, without seeing every property.
Sure.
I think there'll
So-
be a mix of, you know, land that's similar to the Thomas Trail area, but then kind of all the way to sort of just scrub oak, rocky scrub oak terrain.
This is Kelly. Wouldn't we take scrub oak out being it's so flammable?
I think that's for you, Adrian.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, where there is scrub oak, we would still work scrub oak areas. I mean, you know, the kind of just general prescription for scrub oak is you want it to be in clumps that are no more than 2 times. So you want the diameter of the clump to be no more than 2.5 times the height of the tallest stick in the clump. And then you want the spacing between those clumps to be 2.5 times the height of the tallest stick of the taller clumps that you're putting spacing between. And I still haven't figured out a very succinct way to say that doesn't sound like a crazy person. But yeah, I mean, we do take out, you know, oak and we make openings and patches and things like that. So oak would still be worked. Some of the areas over by Dewey, I mean, from what I've seen from Mount Dewey is it's a lot of mountain mahogany, which I'm not super concerned with. So if it's areas that have a lot of mahogany, it may not be something that's prioritized, but yeah, scrub oak needs to be worked.
I got to tell you, I'm very glad to hear this conversation happening because I have some neighbors next door that were devastated at the trees that were taken down when Youth Corps was here. I mean, to the point where they told me the other day, they wouldn't even buy their home today if they had known this is what it was going to look like. So thank you. I'm really glad that we're doing this to inform people ahead of time. Because if they had known which trees were going to be taken out, I think it would have been a very different discussion.
Nate,
Yeah.
Nate, you're asking Adrian to provide a rough description for you to put into the notification. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I think it might be helpful for people to know what the
Mhm.
process is or what is, you know, what the formula is, I guess, for what's going to happen.
Yeah, sure. And Adrian, that's something you can do.
Yeah. When, because like I said, I'm in the field a lot this week. I may be able to get it by maybe Wednesday, Friday by the latest. I would think I can get that over to you.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think we've got a little bit of time, particularly if we're taking this in front of the board. I'm sure that they're going to have additional questions, much as the same as the residents will, of what does this prescription look like? So I think that we'd like to be prepared to answer those questions as well.
Sure.
So I guess, first of all, what needs to happen is this committee today needs to make a formal recommendation, or at least make the decision of a formal recommendation to the board to move forward with this project, the first phase of which would be notification of the BOT and acceptance by the BOT. Second, a property owner notification, which would include a rough prescription provided by Adrian, and then followed by a flagging process to give people an idea of where the boundary lines are according to Adrian's GPS. And then from that point, it'll be a process of trying to have direct contact with neighbors, private property owners, and to our best extent possible to get signed releases. Does that sound like sort of the path forward? And am I missing anything, or are there additional things that Becky, you, Nate, or Mayor Dixon, or I think Nick is on the phone, Kelly, John, is there anything else that y'all feel like that we need to include today in our discussion?
I think, excuse me, I'm a little under the weather, guys. So the scope of it, are we just right away? Are we, clearing them as we would with fire break? How in depth are we getting with these right away? About approximately 13 acres. Are we wiping out all the brush?
Or your question, I think, as I hear it, is are we essentially clear cutting the rights of way?
Yes, that's correct. That would be
Okay.
a very.
Adrian, could you answer that, please?
I do not oversee clear cutting projects. So, no, I mean, unless it's every single tree on the property is dead or has mistletoe, no, it won't be a clear cut. It's going to be the same approach that we take to every project, where it's based in the best available sciences, and clear cutting is not that.
Okay, so like canopies 10 apart from one another, ladder fuels, things of that nature then.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So
Adrian, I have another question as well. When we're looking at some of our evacuation areas, up in those higher parts of town, there are several areas that are that's where that one road is their only way in and out. And so I wonder if
Right.
there's an opportunity through this in very strategic targeted areas to I guess clear the trees so that the town has the ability to further develop some passing areas if in the event that we would need to have those.
Yeah, if we have a contractor out there working right of ways, I mean, we would have a task order basically with our contractor. And if we do find more right of way situations, like, for example, I know along, Hondo, there's quite a few trees that I believe are on the right of way, that we would be able to say, let's push this task order out and expand the acreage a little bit so that we can take care of these areas. If that's what the town wants to do, it would just, of course, be, mow acres, mow money. So that would just be something to think about as the town.
I think that's a great idea, Becky, because I think what we're going to find is we don't have enough workable acreage to consume all of this grant anyway. So let's get the most bang for our buck we can. And if we need to widen the currently developed rights of way, or clear some trees along there, we should do that.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Becky.
I was just thinking, if we're able to identify a couple of those areas that do have that potential for, this is a good area to be able to, pass a fire truck and a horse trailer or a RV. If there's, some of those, or quote unquote staging areas for egress, and I think it would be good to kind of take a look and identify where those areas could be potentially, just based on the geographics, without having to put in too much additional drainage work. But what are those bump outs, the traffic bump outs that are already existing within town land that with a little bit of tree clearing, the town could consider developing?
Is that a question, Becky, for somebody particularly, or is that a statement?
I was hoping that we could just keep that in mind as we're working through this project.
Okay. Yeah. Are there other?
Yeah, hey, this is Mayor Dixon. I had a question on whether or not this is going to be a cut and scatter or a cut and remove type operation.
So seeing as how, pretty much all those right of ways are fairly accessible, what I would be wanting my contractor to do, so whatever contractor we select for this, it would be a cut, leave the wood for firewood, and take the slash either up or down to the next closest road and have them chip it and broadcast it back onto the area.
Just in terms of like total acreage that left in town, I guess the workable acreage, are we going to have enough, even if this is completed? Are we going to be trying to scramble to find more acreage to work either in 2023 or 2024? Or what's that outlook? I guess that's for you, Adrian. I always am confused on the total acreage, like that 80 acre number keeps coming up, and I'm not sure if that's the number or if that's even attainable. But I guess the follow-up question to that is, could it, if we need more acreage than even this right of way, could we put work towards cleaning up some of that co-swap area as well?
Yeah, so you guys aren't in any danger of running out of acres. From what I've seen of the last acreage number that you guys have there, and unfortunately I'm not at my computer, so I can't look it up exactly, but I believe it was in the neighborhood of 65. So we've got plenty of acres. I wouldn't be concerned about you guys running out. As far as cleaning up the co-swap area, if you mean do you mean going in and reworking where they've worked?
Well, there's slash that needs to be either scattered or removed, and some larger trees that were just felled and not bucked at all. So that would be maybe a follow-up item on that.
Was that in the area that Seedmasters worked, or that Mile High Youth Corps worked?
Mile High Youth Corps.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we would be able to get approval to work an area that's already, been worked, since someone's already been in there and it's already been funded out. But we could consider expanding that project area.
Okay. Well, we're just waiting to hear about word on another grant that might help us with that. So I guess we'll just keep you posted. We'll know before the first of the year.
Okay.
Are there other questions or comments for Adrian? or comments in general that need to be taken into consideration in advance of our recommendation to the board? If there are none, then I'm going to make a motion to the Fire Mitigation Advisory Committee that we, as a committee, recommend to the Green Mountain Falls Board of Trustees and Town Management that CUSP, under its current grant, Furworm grant, proceed to a plan to remediate the undeveloped rights of way in Green Mountain Falls. The first step of that plan would be approval by the Board of Trustees. Second step of that plan would be property owner notification, followed by flagging, and then attempt to get as many signed releases from private property owners prior to work beginning. That is the motion. And I will have a second.
A second.
I'll second that.
Okay, Kelly is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. No opposed. So the Fire Mitigation Advisory Committee will make this formal recommendation to the board on the December 13th Board of Trustees meeting. Any final comments? I thank you, Adrian, first of all, for I know you're working in the field and you made it a point to be on this call anyway. I appreciate that. We always appreciate all that CUSP and you have done for Green Mountain Falls. And I thank all who attended today during the sort of the middle of the day. This special meeting of the Fire Mitigation Advisory Committee and all of the input that everybody had. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 2:10 p.m. on Monday, December 5th. Thank you all.